Let's say what he actually is.
My replacement.
All right, everyone, this is not a drill. Lanterns premieres on HBO and HBO Max on August 16th, 2026, and obviously we're super excited about it. We have Kyle Chandler as Hal Jordan, Pierre as John Stewart, and of course, Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, who we've seen on screen before in Superman 2025. And as usual, we have a lot of feelings. See, the first trailer recently dropped, and the fans, including myself, lost their minds. Because this one specifically looked like a murder mystery more than our usual Green Lanterns. Fans joked online about the lack of classic Green Lantern visuals. And someone on X literally wrote, "Oh my god, bro, where's the green? He's a Green Lantern." Which, honestly, is a valid crash out. Then, we got the second trailer with more ring constructs, cosmic action, and Green Lantern energy. And the opinions changed overnight. So, with all these questions about who is Green Lantern and why is Green Lantern, I figured I'd do you one better, pull a Drax the Destroyer on you, and ask you the question, what is Green Lantern? Because unlike other superheroes, well, most of them, the Green Lantern is the story of a ring. It's a mantle that's shared by so many people, and it's been redone and reinvented several times over the past 8 decades. So, let's see how different people deal with the great power and great responsibility that comes with Green Lantern across the different eras that we've had. Alan Scott, the original, the magical, the forgotten, and then unforgettable again. So, this is where it all begins. Alan Scott debuted in All-American Comics number 16 in 1940 in a story written by Bill Finger with art by Martin Nodell. And yeah, we're talking about that Bill Finger, the one and only co-creator of Batman, who didn't get the credit he deserved for the longest time. But that's a whole separate video. What I'm trying to say is that Bill Finger was a gift that just keeps on giving. So, who is Alan Scott? In the 1940 comic issue, he's a railroad engineer. Nothing fancy. Just an engineer who found a mystical Green Lantern and it spoke to him. It told him that it passed through 3 forms throughout history. It was once a flame that gave life. Then it was a lamp that gave a man power. And now it's a ring. And Alan is the person it has chosen. It's simple and yet mystical, right? Like, there's a big story about the lamp and the power and whatnot, but at face value, you can just accept it as it is. And instead of being one of those cosmic instruments with no weakness, Green Lantern's ring has a very specific weakness, which has to be the most glorious thing the Golden Age of comics has ever given us. Many future Green Lantern stories would become associated with the color yellow, and Jeff Johns would later give that weakness a much bigger mythology. But Alan's ring? It doesn't work on wood. Yeah, you could beat the living Jesus out of Alan Scott with a 2x4, and he wouldn't be able to do crap about it. That's so hilariously specific that I love it. I mean, this is why I've always loved Golden Age comics, They just worked on a different relationship with logic, and they just owned it. And this run gave Alan Scott a good run. There were 38 issues of his own solo title published through the 1940s. He was a founding member of the Justice Society of America. He was at his peak. Then, as superhero comics declined in the late 1940s and early 1950s, Alan gradually faded from the spotlight. Then we got the Silver Age, right? And there, DC built up the multiverse where our boy Alan got to retcon to Earth 2, while Hal Jordan took over Earth 1. As a result, Alan Scott immediately got promoted, or demoted depending on who you ask, and went from an active hero to a grandfather figure. He's respected, but then he's never really the center of anything. And that kept happening for decades. Then, in 2012, DC's Earth 2 series came out and Alan was introduced as a gay man. 11 years after that, in 2023, we got Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, written by Tim Sheridan with Cian Tormey as the artist, which gave Alan his first solo series since 1949. There were 6 issues, all set during the Cold War, and here we saw his origin reimagined through the lens of his identity as a gay man in mid-century America. And I'll be honest, I love this comic book. You have a thriller, you have the origin story, you have character growth, and you have a beautiful relationship between Alan Scott and John Ladd. And rightfully so, this comic book became one of the most warmly received Alan Scott stories in modern DC. And you gotta admit, the character arc is pretty sick, right? From Forgotten Grandfather to one of the most emotionally resonant versions of the character in all of modern DC history. He's always been an outlier, but that's exactly what made him so real to me, and I'm so glad Alan got the justice he deserved. Hal Jordan, the greatest, the fallen, the redeemed. He's the one we all think of when we hear Green Lantern. Created by John Broome and artist Gil Kane, Hal Jordan debuted in Showcase number 22, released in 1959, and he became one of the biggest Silver Age reinventions after Barry Allen's Flash helped kick that era open. I know, it sounds like a lot, right? But think about it this way. The whole point of Hal was a reinvention. Then editor Julius Schwartz wanted to modernize Green Lantern by stripping away the magic and giving it a space opera vibe, right? And as a result, we got Hal Jordan, the fearless test pilot at Ferris Aircraft, with later versions leaning harder into his Air Force background. He's literally defined by his complete inability to feel fear, and he embodies that. He's a reckless idiot because of it, and sure, sometimes he comes off a bit obnoxious. But wouldn't you be too confident if you never felt scared? Yeah, that's what I thought. So, obviously, when Abin-Sur, the dying alien, crashes on Earth, his power ring seeks out Hal, the nearest worthy person. Hal gets the ring and gets recruited into the Green Lantern Corps, which is an intergalactic police force that covers over 3,600 sectors of the universe. And they have a boss. They answer to the immortal blue-skinned Guardians of the Universe on planet Oa. And Hal? Well, he's Sector 2814's new officer. All of the things we love about Green Lantern come from Broome and Kane. They're the ones who built it all piece by piece. Then the Bronze Age comes, and we have Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, who pulled Hal out of space and made him look at America. Yeah, we're talking about the 1970 Green Lantern/Green Arrow run, where we see Hal and Oliver Queen travel across the country as they confront racism, inequality, poverty, and even addiction. We see an elderly black man challenge Hal directly, saying that Hal has helped so many blueskins and orangeskins, but what about the blackskins on his own planet? Yeah, I know, it hit me like a truck too. If you haven't read it, check out the 76th issue of this run whenever you have the time because, oh god, it was the biggest mic drop. We also got the legendary drug storyline where we find out with Hal that Speedy is addicted to heroin. Now, this comic came out in 1971. Back then, comics had a self-censorship code, and the code controversy around drug stories was a big deal. Marvel had already published its anti-drug Amazing Spider-Man issues without the comics code sealed, and the code was revised soon after, and DC then pushed forward with the Green Lantern/Green Arrow number 85 and 86, where Speedy's heroin addiction became one of the most famous social issue stories in superhero comics. The whole concept of comics actually tackling real and ugly American problems head-on was a big deal. O'Neil and Adams used Hal to say things that needed saying, and we heard it loud and clear. Then we got Emerald Twilight in 1994, after Coast City was destroyed by Cyborg Superman and Mongol. 7 million people were gone, and the grief of losing this many people completely messed Hal up. He basically goes rogue, attacks the Corps, drains rings, kills fellow Lanterns, and then becomes the supervillain Parallax. This was something because fans weren't ready for this. How do you turn one of the greatest Green Lanterns in history into a villain without any complaints from the fans? Then we got Final Night, where we saw Hal, despite being a villain, sacrificing himself to reignite Earth's dying sun. And then he returns as the Spectre, God's spirit of vengeance, for years before he got his full comeback. And then the comeback comes with Jeff Johns, which goes on to become one of the most celebrated creative runs in Green Lantern history. Green Lantern Rebirth, which ran in 2004 and 2005, revealed that Parallax is actually an ancient fear entity imprisoned inside the Central Power Battery, and had been corrupting Hal's mind. So yeah, Hal's heroism was real, and Johns gave him everything back. And then we got the Sinestro Corps War in 2007. This pitted Green Lanterns against a yellow-ringed army of terror, which was led by Hal's former mentor and greatest rival. As you can understand, this was the kind of extraordinary crossover that made us go crazy with every issue. Then, in 2009, we got Blackest Night. And by the time Blackest Night arrived, John's run had turned the emotional spectrum into a full mythology of different Corps. As we know, willpower is green, fear is yellow, hope is blue, compassion is indigo, rage is red, love is violet, and greed is orange. And Hal is at the center of it all. We learned about the conflicts between every Corps, about Black Lanterns who are dead rising. And yeah, overall, the storylines consistently gave us everything we wanted and more. So, of course, they're hailed as some of the best issues. Geoff Johns and Hal Jordan worked together to give us something epic, and it was perfect. And that's why everything else in this franchise gets held up against him. Guy Gardner, the jerk who was always right. I really like Guy Gardner, and I'm sure there are others who feel that way. But do you know he almost didn't exist? Yeah, I'm not kidding. So here's the thing. The first time he was introduced, it was in the 59th issue of Green Lantern, which came out in 1968, created by John Broome and Gil Kane. And back then, turns out, when Abin Sur's Ring went searching for a replacement, it found Hal Jordan and Guy Gardner. The only reason it chose Hal Jordan was that Hal was closer to the crash site. Yeah, Hal Jordan is the greatest Lantern in history by a geographic technicality. Guy Gardner never got over it, and I probably wouldn't either. For years, he was just a backup. He was always the Lantern who was injured in an earthquake, was almost absent from the books, and even fell into a coma. But then in the 1980s, Steve Englehart and Joe Staton decided to build Guy Gardner from scratch. When Guy came out of his coma, he had physiological damage that manifested as relentless aggression. He genuinely believed that he was the best Green Lantern alive, and whatever he was saying was right. He was loud, with a bowl cut that no one should ever have, but hey, he works it. And as much as I would like to say that he was wrong about most of the things that he was screaming about, he was never wrong. At least not as often as people wanted him to be. Which obviously makes him the most infuriating guy on the panel. So, of course, we have to talk about that moment. Yeah, the one from the Justice League International era. Batman knocked him out with one punch. One right hook, and the best Green Lantern ever falls down like a sack of potatoes. And everyone's been laughing about it for the past few decades. This is perfect because Guy absolutely had it coming, and deep down, you also feel bad for him. Can you blame him for acting the way he did? He could have been the main guy, the hero, but he got pushed into a side character. For what? So of course, eventually Guy picked up Sinestro's yellow ring. He also discovered during his warrior phase that Voldarian alien DNA let him reshape his body into weapons, and he decided to do his own adventure. Eventually, he found his way back to the Corps as a full member and instructor. And even though it was surprising, he became the most genuinely reliable character because if you refuse to acknowledge the difference, then stubbornness and willpower are the same thing. And that's why, even though he's annoyed us, made us mad, and genuinely made me want to reach through the goddamn panel and strangle him sometimes, Guy is a cult favorite. Nathan Fillion played him in the Superman 2025 movie, and there, he absolutely nailed that energy. The bowl cut is also back, so all in all, I would say this is the best time to be a Guy Gardner fan. John Stewart, the architect, the Marine, the icon. We first met John Stewart in the 87th issue of Green Lantern/Green Arrow, cover dated December 1971 and January 1972. Created by Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams, John became one of DC's first major black superheroes, and DC held back no punches when it came to his story. The Guardians informed Hal that they had selected a backup Lantern, and that Lantern is John Stewart, an architect who's politically outspoken, sharp-tongued, and literally the counterpoint to Hal's comfortable instincts. John is everything Hal is not, and John will go to the ends of the earth to prove it. And that began with him refusing to wear a mask. He wasn't going to hide himself. What really makes me happy about John is how his ring works. Since he is an architect, he builds things from the inside out. His constructs are meticulously considered objects, and his designs are some of the most technically powerful in all of their work. And then, in 1988's Cosmic Odyssey, we got the defining tragedy that made John who he is. He failed to stop a bomb on the planet Xanshi, and everyone died. The entire civilization was gone, and John carried that guilt with him forever. He always thought about what he was capable of, and the one time he wasn't enough. And I love that about him. I like that he holds himself accountable through and through. Then we got the animated Justice League series that aired on Cartoon Network in 2001, and everything changed. Instead of picking Hal Jordan, this show chose John Stewart, voiced by Phil LaMarr. And this one decision shaped an entire generation, because when I speak with younger fans at Comic Cons, most of them say John Stewart was their Green Lantern. And that's a big deal when you remember that he started out as nothing more than a backup. The animated Justice League series made John a former US Marine, and later comics folded that military background into his main continuity while keeping his architect identity. That added more to his sense of discipline and tactical command without erasing what came before him. And I'm so happy that we're getting Aaron Pierre to play John Stewart. Kyle Rayner, the Torchbearer, the Last, the White. There are quite a few Green Lanterns, but none of them got the dramatic introduction that Kyle Rayner got. In Green Lantern Volume 3, number 48, released in late 1993 as part of the Emerald Twilight era, Kyle Rayner was only a shadow at the edge of a story that was ending. Then, in Emerald Twilight, we see him fully. Remember how Hal destroyed the core and dismantled everything? Yeah, only one Guardian survived, Ganthet, and he flees to Earth and, in a desperate move, gives the ring to the first person he finds outside a bar in Los Angeles. And that was Kyle Rayner, the freelance comic book artist. Kyle asked Ganthet why him, and Ganthet only said that he'll do. This was a horribly dismissive handoff. It's intentional and also brilliant because Kyle Rayner is just an ordinary person who has no training, backup, or manual. And now he's in an impossible situation, being the last Green Lantern alive, carrying thousands of years of legacy with no one guiding him. In this early run, we find out that his girlfriend, Alex DeWitt, was murdered by the villain Major Force, who left her body stuffed in a refrigerator for Kyle to find. Yeah, no, we saw that on the comic panels. This was real. Comic books don't usually go down this route, but this did, and this eventually became infamous because of what it represented. See, Alex got done dirty because Kyle needed motivation, right? That's what critic Gail Simone argued by coining the term women in refrigerators. This is a trend, or a pattern, whatever you want to call it, where female characters are being killed or maimed to motivate the male hero. And this trend still happens today. And as this is a part of Kyle's life, for better or for worse, we have to acknowledge it. And yeah, Kyle grew. He absorbed Jordan's powers after Final Night and became Ion, a near-omnipotent cosmic entity who could reshape reality on a fundamental level. But Kyle gave up this power to start the Green Lantern Corps again, because that's who Kyle is. And then eventually he became one of the most important White Lanterns, mastering the full emotional spectrum. From a freelance artist, Kyle Rayner became one of the most cosmically significant lanterns in the entire franchise, and we love him for it. Simon Baz, the one who heals. Created by Jeff Johns and Doug Mank, Simon Baz was teased in DC's 2012 Free Comic Book Day issue, before properly debuting in Green Lantern Volume 5, Number 0. Simon Baz is an Arab American and Muslim who was introduced in the post-9/11 American landscape, which was intentional. Johns wanted to talk about racial profiling and Islamophobia through Simon, and rightfully so. After stealing a van that turned out to contain a bomb, Simon was arrested and interrogated as a suspected terrorist. He has a tattoo of the Arabic word courage on his forearm, and then, while he was in federal custody, the power ring appeared on his finger, and suddenly, the guy the federal agents were sure was a terrorist was now a Green Lantern. Now, what makes Simon's power ring different from everyone else is that Simon's ring displayed a rare healing ability when he helped bring his comatose brother-in-law back. And this ability is very specific, so it tells you who Simon is as a person. Then, in the Green Lantern's Rebirth era, he was paired with Jessica Cruz, where Simon got to be the more experienced one of the two, while both characters developed in their own way. However, I have to be honest, I feel like Simon Baz has heavily been underutilized since Rebirth. He's basically vanished on the page, and I wish they didn't do that because we need Arab American representation now more than ever. Jessica Cruz, the anxious hero. Then we have Jessica Cruz, one of DC's most prominent Latina Green Lanterns, and the first major female human Green Lantern in the mainline mythos. Jessica was teased in Green Lantern number 20, fully introduced in Justice League number 31, and became a Green Lantern in Justice League number 50, and, unlike others, her origin is built on trauma. She saw her friends get murdered by criminals, and as a result, she developed severe anxiety and PTSD, and eventually stopped leaving her house altogether, because she was scared the criminals would recognize her. Then, the dark, corrupted ring from the crime syndicate of Earth 3's Power Ring forced itself onto her finger, and she had to spend months fighting to control her hand while everything else worked against her. The ring has its own will, but Jessica Cruz managed to gain the upper hand. She consciously wills herself into action every single time, no matter how scared or panicked she is. And her anxiety, it's always there. It's present as her identity, and her heroism comes from the very fact that no matter what, she shows up, even if it's hard for her. Her Green Lantern's run with Simon was really enjoyable, and then we saw her face to face with fear in the Sinestro Corps arc. And then she came through it all without abandoning anything. For fans who have anxiety disorder or PTSD, Jessica Cruz is the representation they deserve. She's admirable simply for trying again and again, because this time, the ring chose someone who was afraid, and the bearer chose to be brave. How beautiful is that? Safe to say, over the years, we've had many, many versions of Green Lantern. But one thing is common: their will. Be it Alan Scott, Simon Baz, or Jessica Cruz, all of them are brave in their own ways. They have an indomitable will that won't bow down to anything, and that's what Green Lantern is all about. Even Guy Gardner has will. You gotta have some to pull that bowl cut off. But anyway, let me know, who's your favorite Green Lantern? Who do you think of whenever you think about Green Lantern? For me, it's Alan Scott. Let me know in the comments, like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe, and don't forget to stay marvelous.